Hello, I'm David Mandy, President of O&M Partners, and I want to welcome everyone today to the Luminex Resources Corp's Town Hall call. Luminex trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol LR, and I also have an OTC listing in the United States. That symbol is LUMIF. A little background for those who are new to these broadcasts. O&M Partners is in the business of bringing public companies and investors together in real time. We're not a broker dealer. We're not commissioned. We are simply a communications company. We're hoping that this broadcast will help you make a better informed and wiser investment decision. Before we turn today to our host, Marshall Koval, who's the president and CEO of Luminex. We're very pleased to have a special presentation by Ross Beatty. Ross is very well known in and out of the mining business. He's a geologist, entrepreneur, and investor. He's had success in the mining industry in both discovery of successful discovery and also building mining companies. He's the founder of 6 different companies, among them Pan American Silver, Global Copper Corp in Northern Peru. He's also has been at the helm of 12 different companies, and presently occupies a position as chairman of Equinox Gold Corp. He's also chairman of Pan American Silver Corp and also chairman at Regulito Copper. Ross is also president and director of the Sitka Foundation, which is dedicated to the promotion of biodiversity. He's very dedicated to environmentalism, and also he's quite the philanthropist. So it's a real pleasure to have Ross presenting today, and we're going to turn the call over to Ross.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being on this call. I appreciate the invitation to speak a little bit here. It's what's going on right now in gold specifically. That's the main commodity that I'm looking at right now. Gold and silver, of course, but also maybe the general conditions. And it's a very weird day to be doing this today because of the absolute mayhem in the major markets. As I sit here on Monday morning, March the 9th, the market is down about 1,800 points. I think it's probably its biggest drop in, well, certainly in my lifetime, I think. And it's followed up a pretty weird week last week where the Dow was, down a couple thousand points. So the last couple of weeks, and originally it was because of this COVID-19 outbreak that is kind of coursing around the world. But this weekend, the big event was Russia and OPEC not having a meeting of minds about whether to drop production. Instead, they're going to sort of go their own ways. And Saudi Arabia reacted by saying it'll sell its oil at whatever price the market wants to give it, and it's resulted in a massive drop in the oil price and just some general chaos and mayhem. And in these kind of situations, you normally expect gold to do pretty well, and I continue to expect gold to do pretty well. It is down a little bit on the morning. It's when people have a need for cash, margin calls, collateral holders don't really fuss anything except getting their money back, and they sell everything. And so anybody holding gold bullion or gold ETFs or gold stocks is going to be sold off, and until the margin holders are satisfied, and then things will kind of get back to normal. We saw this kind of mayhem most significantly in 2008 and 2009. This is a very different thing. This is a bump. This is not a major market meltdown like that. This is not a situation where you had an absolutely fundamental problem that people were borrowing too much money. Banks were lending too much money on no collateral or flimsy collateral, and there were products in the market that were almost fraudulent products. These subprime mortgages and the products that companies were selling to people were just simply crap products. But there was a huge amount of money involved, and so when those went poof, an awful lot of money was lost by investors, and there was a fundamental problem in the market, which took a long time and a lot of stimulus to bring back, a lot of stimulus to get things moving again. This is a situation where people are worried about getting sick, and they're worried all over the world, so they're just not traveling, they're not buying things, they're not getting out and making the economy happen. This will pass. All these viruses do end up fizzling out. Either they mutate or summer comes and they just don't function well in a hot environment or whatever. But this is not likely to be a really truly serious health problem for the world. The problem with this COVID-19 is it's unknown, and it's very contagious. It has a higher mortality rate, so it's worrying a lot more people, and people are right to try to do something about it. But we know how to deal with these days. We have modern medicine. We know you have to isolate people, put them in quarantine. If you get it, go home, stay home, don't do things. So this is a bump in the road on the financial markets. It's quite extraordinary geopolitical game that Russia is playing with both OPEC and the United States, because after all, they're trying to kill the U.S. shale oil business right now. That is their game, and we'll see what happens. It certainly is hurting the shale oil producers in the U.S., and by direct relation, it's really, really having a profound impact on all oil producers and all, major markets. The U.S. is a very much an oil market. Canada is. Many, many countries in the world are. So, if something happens to drop the oil price, this is bad, generally speaking, for the economy. But if you think for a sec, it's actually good for the economy, because it means that the fundamental energy cost in everything we do goes down as the oil price goes down. Things should be cheaper to produce. The economy should be healthier in all those other things that use oil. So I see all this as very much a road bump. It's not going to last long. Russia and the United States and OPEC will come to terms with this, because this is really a situation where everybody is getting hurt a lot, and that's generally speaking not something that lasts for long. So here's the bottom line: when the COVID-19 outbreak kind of runs its course, and when this oil game that's going on right now runs its course, there will be a big market reaction on the upside. Things will get back to normal. People will start spending. The economy will function again. And so out of this fear and chaos that's happening right now will be opportunity. So let's go to metals for a moment. Metals are really being hammered by this as the economy weakens. People don't use as many metals. So metals are being hammered. When the economy picks up again, metals will be used again. China's going to have more stimulus. America will have stimulus that they've announced. There'll be stimulus all over the place. That'll get things going again, and metal prices will rebound. But if you can hold through it, just like in the last big turmoil in 2009, things will bounce back, and you should come back, and you should be whole again. There's so much debt in the world. There's so much corporate debt, government debt, entitlements. Deficit budgets everywhere. The U.S. is running $1 trillion deficit budget. That's just impossible to sustain. I cannot see how that can be sustained for long. And when that unravels, you're going to see a nice big move up in gold. The dollar devalues, you're going to see a nice move up in gold. When inflation comes back, it has to come back. It's going to be a sentiment thing probably, but all of a sudden you're going to see everything's priced higher. And when that happens, gold, it's going to be very good for gold. I mean, without the mayhem of the last couple of weeks that was COVID-19 induced, and now the oil shock induced, I was very, very bullish on gold. Well, now I'm even more bullish on gold. I see it running through the previous high of just under $1,900 that was set back in 2011. But I'm sure gold's going to be over $2,000 in this run. How much higher? Who knows? When? Who knows? But all the factors I see in the macro markets should be very good for gold. And of course, by connection, silver. Silver's problem is it's also an industrial metal. So it's got a little bit of both, and that's why it's not performing as well as gold right now. But if things re-stimulate, it will have a wonderful run, just like it did back in 2010, 2011. So gold and silver assets are very good things to hold. And you can hold those either by buying the metal, by buying the ETF, or by buying gold stocks. And there's all categories of gold stocks. There's the large producers, which offer pretty good exposure to the metal, but and have the benefit of having income and dividends typically, and diversified assets which offer them lower risk opportunities, and therefore they're priced much higher. They typically will trade for multiples of 1.5 or so to 2 times their net asset value. Those are bought by people who believe gold's going higher. That's the only way you can justify those multiples. But the strange thing today, which did not happen, 10 and 20 years ago, is that the junior gold stocks are not attracting the kind of investor interest that they used to. They're trading very cheaply. They're trading at fractions of their net asset value. And the juniors can split into 2 categories. The producers, the junior producers, which would typically have 1 mine or a couple of mines or smaller mines or mines in strange places. And the junior explorers. The junior explorers have no income. They have pure exploration assets. And Luminex is a classic example of that. Luminex is basically a one-country risk, Ecuador. You have to have an opinion of Ecuador, and you have to like it, or at least accept it as a decent place before you invest in Luminex. Quite frankly, just to sidetrack maybe for a second on countries, I don't think you can be too cute trying to figure out what country is good and what country is bad. You need to have a diversified asset base with maybe 5 or 10 of these junior companies in your portfolio, because you just never know what, in the course of a year or 2 or 3 years, what country is going to be good and what country is going to be bad. Some of the great countries today could be bad a year from now, and vice versa. So the best way to handle that is have a diversified portfolio. Ecuador's really been excellent, quite frankly, in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been involved there. It's encouraged mining quite a bit. It's attracted major companies. All the big companies in the world are there. It has now got 3 big operating mines. It had none 5 years ago. Lundin has gone there with the big gold mine. So Ecuador is just fine so far. And if you want to have the best exposure to not just the gold price, but also, the great wealth creator called discovery, you have to have in your portfolio some good explorers. So it's the kind of thing I think most investors ought to have in their portfolio, these sort of cheap, very, very cheaply valued stocks that have low price to net asset value multiples, things that are going to do really well if the gold discovery continues on the property, and they're going to do well as well if the gold price keeps going up, because they are fundamentally gold investments. So to me, as you go down market into the juniors, you simply accept more risk on one side, but much more reward on the other. And investment is entirely a game of matching risk and reward. I love the exploration assets. I've done really well on these exploration assets because in my portfolio, I have the good ones that are well run with good management teams that have lots and lots of money invested in them themselves, lots of skin in the game. You can trust the management, that have good assets, and in countries that are, relatively speaking, safe. I would rather be in Ecuador than many, many other countries in the world. In fact, probably most other countries in the world. It has an excellent geological endowment. It has a pro-mining government. It has all the ingredients you want to have a success that you can take both from exploration right through to production. And it's now got a proven track record of doing that. The market right now is very favorable for these kind of stocks, particularly the small companies that have been ignored by the market. Otherwise, I mean, of course, what's going on today in the market is just so weird and bizarre and quite frankly, almost unprecedented that it's really hard to say how it's going to unwind from the standpoint of timeline. But I can say with 100% assurance, it will unwind. The mayhem will end, and it will be replaced by a major move up. If you have any spare cash, this is the time to buy. It may not be the very bottom today, but boy, this is when opportunities happen. This is when you want to be greedy and not fearful. You want to go against the grain that everyone else is having to suffer through and be courageous. This is when you make the big money right now. With that, I think I'll close. Good luck in these crazy times.
Thank you very much, Ross. Now we're going to turn to our host today, Marshall Koval, who's the president and CEO of Luminex. Marshall is a veteran of the mining business, 40 years, corporate management. He's involved in M&A, finance, mineral exploration, also mine development, has operations experience, and he's worked in over 30 countries. previously was a partner of Ross Beatty's with Lumina Capital. He also CEO of Northern Peru Copper and VP Corporate Development for Lumina Copper, both of which were sold. He also is president of Colorado-based Pincock, Allen and Holt, which is a renowned consulting and engineering firm in the mining and energy space. Also pleased to have Scott Hicks on the line with us, who is VP Corporate Development and Communications for Luminex. I'm going to turn the call over to you, Marshall.
Yeah, welcome everybody. I appreciate Ross's comments, and I think before I get too far into the Luminex story, I think what I'll want to talk a bit about is where we're trading right now. Today we closed at 60 cents a share, and to give you an idea of that, that's our 52-week low was 54 cents Canadian. So, you know, if you listen to Ross's comments about the time to buy in the market, now's a good time. So let me go ahead and kind of walk you through the Luminex story. We're in Ecuador, as Ross mentioned. We're advancing a portfolio of large-scale exploration properties in Ecuador, primarily gold and copper projects. There we go. I'm going to make some forward-looking statements. So here's that slide. And if you look at what we have in Luminex today, we have 3 key assets, 2 world-class partners, all in Ecuador. Luminex Resources, the company is primarily moving forward with the Condor project. We're the operator there. There's some 4 million ounces of gold in indicated and inferred, 1.4 in indicated, 2.5 in inferred. And we've recently made a new discovery at the camp zone. It's a higher grade zone near the surface, directly under our camp there, where our first drill hole hit 40 meters of 4.8 grams per ton gold. If you fast forward to today, we've got 32 holes into the project. We're currently drilling, and we're going to have a resource, maiden resource out in March. Obviously, we'll continue to drill. So that'll be the first look at sort of what resources we have. And we're funding that ourselves. And then we have 2 world-class partners in Anglo American and BHP. Anglo American is the operator of our Pegasus projects. They're advancing the project. They have to spend $57 million over 7 years for 60% of the company, and they can earn an additional 10% if they take us to a production decision. Anglo is looking at drilling in the second half of this year. They've identified several drill targets, but they're going to focus on one main area initially. I'll show you a bit of that later. And then BHP is the operator at Tarqui. They have to spend $42 million over 6 years to earn 60%, and they can then earn an additional 10% by spending $40 million more, which basically takes it through feasibility study more than likely. They are focused on one primary area, Tarqui, about a 5,000 hectares area, and primarily one deposit there, whereas Anglo is looking at a broader land package, about 65,000 hectares. So combined, there's about 100,000 or $100 million that will be spent between 2018 and 2025, with options for additional spending should they move forward with the earn-ins. So the Lumina Group, Ross talked a bit about it, but basically I've been involved with Ross since 2004 through several companies, copper, gold companies, and I'm also on the board of Equinox Gold with Ross, and then Anfield was merged into Equinox Gold about 2 years ago. And then all the other copper stories, basically we raised about $290 million from the market and returned about $1.6 billion US to shareholders. So let's take a look at Luminex. Basically, we got key shareholders. Ross has 19.9% of the company. Ecuadorian Entrepreneurial Group has 8.6%. Route 1, a US fund out of California, has 8.5%. Management of the board has 6.7%, and other smaller US funds have 6.2%. Our market cap today at 60 cents a share is about 43 million. Cash on hand as of December is 8.4 million US. and as I mentioned earlier, the trading range. So we're trading near the bottom of that trading range, and really nothing has fundamentally changed on the project. It's just a market condition that we're dealing with where we're at the low end. So to me, that represents an opportunity. Ross talked about Ecuador's mining progress. I think if you look at sort of between 2014 and today, the government has been pro-mine development. They've taken a lot of steps to enhance the investment environment for mining in Ecuador. You've got most of the major mining companies in the world have come into the country. And I think the crowning event here was in the last quarter of last year, both Fruta del Norte and Mirador were commissioned. Mirador is a large copper gold open pit project, 60,000 tons a day, being run by Tongling Mining, or EXA is their local operating company. And then Fruta del Norte is Lundin's project. Both of those are operating smoothly. And as those two projects continue to do well in the country, I think part of the risk of Ecuador, the noise about Ecuador, whether you can mine successfully or not, will start to go away. I mean, one of the points real interesting is Fruta went from a feasibility study to commissioning in 3.5 years. And if you look globally, that's a pretty aggressive timeline. And so you can permit and you can develop and you can build and operate mines in Ecuador. So I'm going to go ahead and take you into where our project areas are. You can see Pegasus A and B here. That's the Anglo American joint venture. Again, that's 65,000 hectares roughly. Coming down to the south, you have Tarqui, which is the BHP joint venture. Over here, Cangrejos is Lumina Gold, our sister company's development project, the Cangrejos project. Then all these blue concessions are primarily copper porphyry targets that we have within Luminex. And then our main flagship effort here is the Condor project, which is 35 kilometers to the south of Fruta del Norte and about 55 south of Mirador in this trend along the eastern border of Ecuador with Peru in the Condor Cordilleran Belt, which is probably the most highly prospective region in the country. And here's a little bit better close-up. We've got Tarqui to the north. Kimi is one of our exploration projects. The Mirador project, all these are copper porphyry targets here. You come further down into Fruta del Norte's land package. They have a joint venture with Newcrest, and that's these green projects here to the south of us, and then also up in this area, and then our Condor project. And then you have Sol Gold, Fortescue to the west. So you've got, this is a real active corridor within Ecuador. You've got all the major players kind of looking in this area, so highly prospective. So if we look at the highlights here, there's been about $40 million spent between 93 and 2016 by previous owners. And then we've spent quite a bit of money here in the last couple of years. We own 90% of the project, and 10% is owned by the Ecuadorian Armed Pension Fund. The northern part of the project area where these yellow diamonds are is the epithermal gold area. The southern part is more gold copper porphyry system. I'll give you a little bit more details on these later. So the Condor area, again, the northern part in these red stars is the epithermal gold area where we're concentrating now. The red stars indicate resources that exist, and you can see them on the table on the left. The camp zone is the new discovery. It's up in that area. I'll show you some details on that. That's really exciting. And then this southern area, Santa Barbara, Alito, this is copper porphyries. So the camp zone is directly underneath the camp, as I mentioned earlier. The first discovery hole was a 40-meter intercept of 4.8 grams per ton gold and 11 grams per ton silver. That intercept is right here, close to the surface. This chart on the left here shows the first 18 holes where we've drilled, but what you can see is this strike length of about 1.1 kilometers long and we've drilled down to about 700 meters, and we've got a new zone that's starting to develop. And as I mentioned earlier, we're on hole 32 right now. Hole 30, the holes from 28 through 32 are down in this region, drilling back this direction. So if we look in long section here, so northwest to southeast, you can see that we've drilled the Condor zone down to about 700 meters vertical. It continues at that depth. And basically right now, the resource estimate that we're looking to put out at the end of the month here will encompass probably holes 1 through 27. And we want to just get the size and the scope of the project out there into the market. And what we believe we'll see here is the potential to develop a project definition. We've started metallurgy on the camp zone, and the idea is this is near surface and potentially quite a bit higher grade than a lot of the other resources, Los Cuyes and Soledad. And that may define a project, and later in the mine life, we could bring in the Soledad and Los Cuyes deposits, and I'll show you a bit of that later. So we've got some pretty major intercepts here. If I go to the figure on the right here, this black dotted line, this is sort of what we see, and this is all rhyolite dike related, and then ground has been broken up and hydrothermal fluids have come through here. And you can see a lot of these drill intercepts are pretty significant all through here. You know, for instance, here's one that's 35 meters of 4.58 grams per ton. So you can see the structure basically continues at depth. Down at the bottom here, we even have like 19 meters of 6.09 grams per ton gold. So what we're doing right now is trying to block this out and try to identify basically kind of the scale of the potential project. Here you can see some high-grade marcasite, pyrite, sphalerite, 52 grams per ton gold. And these are the dikes that are controlling most of the mineralization. And oftentimes they're mineralized themselves. This particular one was 3.6 grams per ton. So it's mineralogically and structurally, it's akin to Fruta del Norte. I'm not saying it's a Fruta del Norte, but it's interesting from a mineralogical and metallurgical perspective. So the camp zone target is off here on the left. It's about 1.7 kilometers across here to Soledad. We've done a Z10 geophysics survey, and we've identified this Soledad Baja target right in between the two deposits. We'll be drilling that later in the year. It looks pretty prospective from what we've seen. So hopefully we'll start to put more gold ounces on the books with drilling there. Now, if you look at it, there's another target, Prometedor. So again, I'll come up here. Here's the camp zone area. This is the Cuyes pit. That's a diatreme. This is the Soledad pit. So all through this area is the Soledad Baja area. But then we have the Prometedor zone, which is, you can see all this gold mineralization from surface channel sampling, rock chips and all. So the trend continues down this direction, and later in the year, we hope to be up in the Prometedor area drilling. We're in the process now of preparing access up in the area. So we have a lot more work to do out here, a lot more discovery potential. And again, as Ross mentioned earlier, these exploration plays in junior companies are not getting much traction in the market. So again, we believe pretty firmly that there's going to be a lot of upside to this project. So let me go into the Anglo American earn-in. So this is the Pegasus A and B concessions. I already kind of went through the terms of the deal. So let's go in and look a little bit at some of the targets that they've identified. So this is a mag survey geophysics that they've done over the area, and this Medusa target is one of the interesting ones that they've confirmed both in the mag surveys and some Z10 electromagnetic geophysics that they've done. I'll show you that next. Well, let me go back for a second. Here, you can see the other targets besides Medusa that more follow-up works will need to be done. But what Anglo is looking at here is district scale sort of porphyry targets, whereas BHP at Tarqui is looking at a specific deposit or one or two deposits close by each other, where here Anglo is looking for district scale play. Here's a cross-section through the Medusa target, and this is the ZTEM results. So basically, this is the area that they'll be looking to drill. The ZTEM sort of shows a pyrite halo over a classic porphyry system geologically. So we're real excited to see what kind of drill results they'll get. They'll drill that in the second half of the year, more than likely. We are also advancing our Cascas project ourselves. So the Condor project and the Cascas are two that we're focusing on as priority targets. And what you have at Cascas is sort of a 5 kilometer long by 2.5 kilometer wide copper anomaly. And then off to the edge, you sort of have sort of a 2 kilometer long by 1 kilometer wide gold anomaly that's coincident with it. And we've been doing soil sampling, and the gold anomaly looks really interesting. So this is an area that hopefully later in the year we'll be drilling as well. So the BHP earn-in is at the Tarqui project up here. You've got Tarqui. Kimi is another one of our projects that we're doing kind of initial work there. And then Mirador. And a lot of time these copper porphyry systems occur in clusters. They're along the same trend here. So Tarqui has returned some of our best copper values in the field, sort of plus 1% copper in quite a few of the outcrop and rock chip samples and channel samples that we've done. And that's really what attracted BHP to the project. And they hope to be drilling in the second half of the year as well. This is sort of the discovery outcrop zone at Tarqui. Also, you can see there's quite a bit of copper mineralization in soil and rock all through this area. So you've got sort of a probably a 5-6 kilometer area where you've got pretty strong copper, and that's what BHP will be focusing on. So reasons to invest in Luminex. Obviously, the new discovery at the camp zone provides a lot of upside to gold. We're going to have the resource out in 2020 in March at the end of this month, and we're moving towards defining a PEA project there. We're doing metallurgy right now, and the metallurgical response seems to be really good. We expect similar sort of metallurgical results to Fruta del Norte, since mineralogically the two projects are somewhat similar. We have earn-in agreements with two top-tier copper companies, with Anglo and BHP. We currently hold an additional 25,000 hectares in Orquídeas, Cascas, La Canela, Tres Picachos, and Kimi that will advance those ourselves. And we're an exploration team that has been together for a long time. As I mentioned, myself, Leo Hathaway, and some of the team have been with Ross since 2004. We have a consistent history of exploring and discovering, de-risking, and monetizing assets. And then the management is highly aligned with 27% ownership combined. So listen, looking at today's market, even the majors, Newmont, Agnico, Barrick, Franco-Nevada, so the royalty companies and producers, they're down anywhere from 5 to 8%. And then you look at sort of the junior space, and you're seeing a lot of juniors down 10, 12%. So again, good time to buy. And David, I'll turn it back over to you for questions.
Thank you, Marshall. As always, well presented. Well, let's start with Lincoln Rathman. Lincoln, do you have a question today for Marshall?
I have a couple questions. Thank you for the interesting presentation. You said that Anglo's looking for a district scale porphyry deposit at Pegasus. Are they close to finding it? And if so, wouldn't that be the dominant asset of the company?
Well, it's got that potential to be the dominant asset. And, basically until you get out there and drill these, like Anglo has and spent the last year and a half doing extensive exploration, geologic groundwork, geophysics, and they're to the point now where they have this Medusa target that I mentioned, which is right here. And that could potentially, if there's a discovery there, it could change the quantum of the company for sure. And, you know, we hope it does.
But this is still early days, I guess, for that.
Yeah, it's early days. I would characterize where they're at now as fairly grassroots. And once you confirm it with drilling and a discovery is made there, then it's a bit different story. But it's got significant potential, and not just the Medusa itself, but you can see all these shaded areas or other potential targets that look really, really good as well.
And just one additional question: do you know much about these multiple copper targets you have in the south of the country?
That would be. Let me go over here. Oops, wrong way. I think the map will just help a little bit, help me explain them a bit better if you can hang with me. Almost there. So Cascas, for instance, this is a really strong copper gold system, and it's about 5 kilometers along strike and about 3 kilometers wide. We've come in and done a fair amount of work in this area, and we're working in the area now. And our hopes are towards the end of the year, being able to do drilling in the area. So this is a pretty significant prospect. We've got the Orquídeas project, which we had a joint venture with Fruta del Norte, or excuse me, with Fruta del Norte, First Quantum Resources, and we put 6 drill holes into it. We did have copper shows, and we're continuing to do some work there, but it was not to the scale that First Quantum was looking for, so they backed out of that deal. And then we've got some of the other projects, La Canela. They have good early stage potential for copper and gold as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lincoln, as always, for your questions. We'll turn to Heinz Thoma. Heinz, questions today for Marshall?
Thanks for the presentation. You have quite a bit going on. I know that you had a recent financing. How long will that money last you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you look at the history of the group, once we've got on to discoveries or significant value adds to existing projects, we've continued to drill, and we have the ability to raise money in the market. And so if I look at right now the Condor project, particularly in the camp zone and in the Soledad Baja area and Prometedor, we have 2 drills running, and we should be able to get into the second half of the year without any problem with the current drilling. And if we have continued success, based on that success, we would potentially ramp up. So I think we're pretty comfortable into the second half of the year before we need to go to the market again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heinz. We'll turn to Doug Loud. Doug.
Doug Loud here. Jeffrey Masseri sends regards. He had to run off. You have a huge land package, and you've obviously explored a good bit of it. How much remains unexplored?
Yeah, so there's probably the projects that account for about 25,000 hectares of our land package. We are doing real grassroots exploration work in that area now. We've got some 20 geologists within the group, but the intensity of the exploration of La Canela, Tres Picachos, Cascas isn't to the level of, say, what's happening at Tarqui or Fruta or Pegasus or our camp zone Condor project.
But I mean, my math says it's something on the order of over 300 square miles of prospect area. Like
yeah, I don't do miles anymore. I'm stuck in into hectares. But so we have between within Luminex, we have about 125,000 hectares
Right.
of land, of which 65,000, 67,000, something in that ballpark is the Pegasus concessions. There's another 5 or 6,000 that's Tarkey, and then Condor, Condor, and the rest of the other concessions make up the balance. So yeah, you're right. It's a big area. We're doing what we can to get out there and do the exploration work. The primary thing is that you meet the government's exploration commitments over a 4-year period, and then you can continue the claims. We're doing the work to do that. So, you know, there's a chance of a lot more potential discovery within the land package that we have. If you look at, you know, Pegasus and the Tarkey areas, we did a lot of the initial work ourselves that led to the proof that there was good exploration potential. And that's what drew in BHP and Anglo American. And that was inbound interest. We weren't out necessarily looking for a partner. And we're continuing that same type of work in the other concession areas.
That's great. It sounds like permitting isn't a problem for the kind of work you're doing.
No, not for the early stage stuff. And permitting was a bit slow when it came to EIAs for drilling. And then the government implemented a scout drilling program where you have to submit your initial environmental documentation, secure a water permit from Sinagua, and you could go out and drill on 30 pads, multiple holes from those pads. And we've done that at our Cangrejos deposit, and other mining companies are. So that's a big improvement, and that's part of the government's effort to sort of streamline the ability to carry out exploration in Ecuador.
Okay, just one last question. SolGold ran into some trouble with, I guess they were artisanal miners banding together to have lawsuits against professional mining companies. Have you seen anything like that in your areas?
No, not in our areas. You know, we do have some illegal miners within the concessions at Condor, but they're not impacting our ability to operate in there. And the government has come out and been pretty strong that they want responsible mining and not illegal mining. So they've made efforts to come in and shut down some of the. It's hard to shut them all down at once, but they've shut down some of the legal miners. They've blown up adits and mine workings to close off those illegal miners in several areas throughout the country.
Great, very fascinating. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Doug Loud. We'll turn to Chesley Morton. Chesley, questions today for Marshall?
Absolutely. First of all, I'd say you are blessed with a number of opportunities there. So if some investor that comes in today at these deeply discounted prices buys with the thinking that they're going to hold for the next decade and be rewarded with a series of spincos, would that be an unreasonable expectation on their part?
No, not at all. And I mean, if you look at the, let me just go back to this slide where we talk about this one right here, our group track record. If I look at Lumina Copper, Northern Peru Copper, I was the CEO of that, Global Copper, Regalito, Lumina Royalty, all these companies were within one company called Lumina Copper. And the Lumina Copper, original Lumina Copper was this Regalito company here. And that had the, what is the Caserones mine today. And basically the business model is we've set all these companies up into structures, sort of silo structures that they can be spun out easily based on discoveries. So for instance, if you get a discovery at Tarkey with BHP, that could easily be moved into its own company. If you got a discovery with Anglo American, the same thing could happen. So that's how we've structured the company, and that's how the history of the group has been.
Absolutely. I did well with Lumina Copper. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess one last thing to state there is, you know, we're an explorer developer. That's been the business model. That's still what we're looking at here. And so that's why Condor is pretty exciting. Basically, with the known resource before we discovered the camp zone, we had done some work in, in a $1,500 gold environment. You can make a case to define a development project, but this higher grade discovery of the camp zone, that should further enhance that possibility. So, as we get the resource out and we finish this drilling up through this year, hopefully we'll be moving towards that PEA as quick as we can.
Exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chesley. We have Paul Stevens on the line with us. Paul, do you have a question today for Marshall? Okay. Paul? We'll come back. Let's try, we'll turn to Ram. Ram, do you have a question today? Okay, I guess Ram is listen only. We've lost Matt Geiger. Back to Lincoln for just a second. Lincoln, do you have any follow-up today on the questions you asked? Go on.
Matt Geiger's here. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, great, Matt. Okay, didn't realize you were here, Matt. Question today? Thanks, Matt.
I do have a couple. Thanks for the update, Marshall. There's a lot to like about the company at the current valuation. Lots going on. Can I ask how much money has been put into Anglo has been put into Pegasus thus far?
So Anglo's, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's north of 5 million, probably closer to 7 or 8, somewhere in that ballpark.
Excellent. And how many meters are budgeted to be drilled this year? And then the same question for BHP at Tarqui.
Yeah, basically they haven't come in with the drill targets and the budgeted amount, other than they've advanced at Tarqui a geophysics survey, a ZTEM survey, similar to the survey that was done by Anglo American, and they further defined drill targets. So now they're in the process of ground truthing those targets, and all they've mentioned is they hope to be drilling by the end of the year.
Great. And at your 3 main projects, are you guys permitted to drill tomorrow per se, or are you waiting for water use permits on all of them?
Well, we're in the process of getting the water use projects at Cascas, and at the Condor project, we're all permitted to drill, no issues there. We have water and we have permits in place. The Cascas, one of the options we have also is you can truck water in if you need to. We did that at Orchidius. So if we get to the point where we don't have those permits in place, we'll be able to get it. And right now, Sinagua, which is the water agency, is being moved into the environmental ministry. So there's a little bit of a structural change with the government to streamline the permitting process. So anyway, with Cascas, if we decide to get out there and drill it, we should be in pretty good shape, no issues to do so.
Great. One more quick one for you. When did Route 1 Capital get involved, if you don't mind me asking? I feel like that's been a relatively recent development, because I didn't see them in the deck last time I took a look at the story.
Yeah, I think over the last 2 years, they've been involved in financing, and they've sort of moved their position up as each time we've gone out and financed.
Okay, great. Good to know. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Just back to Lincoln before we proceed to close. I know Lincoln had a couple different questions.
Yes, I have one more question. What sort of information flow can we expect for the 3 projects in the balance of this year?
So obviously on the Tarqui project with BHP and the Pegasus with Anglo is drill results. If they when they get out and start drilling, hopefully we'll see some drill results that we'll be able to release with them within the year. The Condor project, continue to watch for drill results, updated resource, metallurgical results at the camp zone. Hopefully some good drill results in the Soledad Baja area, and then hopefully later in the year some good drill results out of Prometedor. And then hopefully in Cascas, before the year's over, we'll be able to go in there and drill within that area. We're doing a lot of exploration soil grid sort of target definition work, focusing on primarily the gold anomaly and then secondarily the adjacent copper anomaly.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lincoln. Okay, we're going to we'll turn back to you, Marshall, for closing remarks. We've got all the questions.
Well, listen, as bad as the market was today and as ugly as things feel, I think it gives a unique opportunity. We're trading pretty close to our 52-week low. If you would have talked to me on sort of February 15th, we were at 84 cents. Fortunately, we're in the position where we don't need to raise capital in the near term, so we can continue our drilling efforts. Obviously, the group has a history of successful exploration, discovery, and development. And I think particularly the Condor project and also our partners in Anglo American and in BHP have the potential to deliver. So I think at the end of the day, we're a management team that has a strong track record, ability to execute, ability to finance, and we're underpriced in the market right now. So I think it's a great time to look at the company and seriously take a position if you're willing to invest in Ecuador and in some good gold and copper projects.
Thank you, Marshall. Thanks everybody for your attendance today. And just to recall, we have Scott Hicks on the line with us as well, who heads up communications and investor relations, a good person to follow up with if you have any questions. Again, thanks everyone for your attendance. And again, thanks to you, Marshall, for presenting.
Thanks, David.